People conjure up many images when they think about the Jewish people. They think of people getting married under a chuppah, men with long beards shekeling in front of the Western Wall, menorahs, and of course the Star of David. What most people don't realize, however, is that they're actually grouping all of the Jewish diaspora into one category. It's true that at one point in time, the Jewish people were a collective. Judaism is a scriptural religion that at one point all followed the same rituals and traditions with only slight variations between communities. And when a custom or ritual did change, it changed for everyone. For these reasons, Jews are rich in heritage and steeped in tradition. But within Judaism, there are different movements that stand in stark contrast to each other. The exact moment in history when Judaism splintered into different movements is up for debate. Some argue the split happened centuries ago during the Maccabean Revolt, but more agree it happened during the early 19th century in Europe. During this time in history, Jews were no longer required to segregate themselves from societies, and most of the ghettos they were forced to live in were abolished. There were also great technological advances in transportation, which shrank the gap between communities and widened society as a whole. As a result, the middle class rose in prominence along with the Jews' place in it. Suddenly, there was a need for Jews to blend into the societies in which they lived. Some rabbis saw this move as assimilation and insisted the Jews remove themselves from secular society altogether. But most Jews saw integrating into local cultures as self-preservation. These differing opinions split the Jewish community and further divided the diaspora. For years, rabbis remained steadfast in their opinion that Jews should segregate themselves from Christians and other religions. But the allure of acceptance after millennia of segregation led many Jews to either convert to Christianity or renounce Judaism altogether. Since forcing Jews to remain segregated failed so badly, a few rabbis suggested that changes be made to customs and traditions that would appeal to modern Jews. It was believed these changes would keep Judaism alive and ensure its future growth. At first, most of the changes were to prayer services and included things such as translating the Hebrew Siddur into the local German language. No real changes to the core belief system of Judaism. But the more changes that were made to age-old customs, the more people realized bigger changes might need to be made. So people started looking deeper into what they thought would need to change. Leading these changes was German Rabbi Abraham Geiger. Geiger had grown up with serious doubts about his Jewish heritage. In particular, he had a problem accepting that the Torah was not only divinely inspired, but also directly written by God himself. Geiger also noticed that Judaism had already been evolving slowly over the years, and these changes actually made it easier for Jews to live in accordance with Judaism. Seeking to further evolve and modernize Judaism, Geiger met with other prominent rabbis. The meetings between the rabbis continued, and from them bigger and bigger changes were implemented. So many modifications were made that what emerged more resembled Christianity, and very little remained of what many adherents knew as Judaism. Needless to say, these changes outraged those who considered themselves Shomer Shabbos, or those who would later be known as the Orthodox community. The Orthodox refused to bend on any of the core tenets of Judaism, such as the divinity of the Torah, and the chasm between Geiger and the Orthodox widened. Unable to persuade the Orthodox to universally accept these changes, Geiger and his followers permanently split off from the Orthodox and officially formed the Reform movement. After the split, it seemed that there were now two camps for Jews to choose from. Some Jews were drawn to the idea of an evolved Judaism, but didn't necessarily agree with all the changes being made. These Jews were caught in the middle of a fight between tradition and evolution, and from that struggle was born the conservative movement. And for the first time in history, there were three official sects of Judaism. To better understand the differences between these three movements, let's look at the differing views for each on key topics. With respect to the Torah, the Orthodox see it as 100% correct, divine, and written by the hand of God. The conservative movement also sees it as divine, but they accept that there may be some antiquated notions in there. The Reform movement, however, see the Torah as written by men inspired by God. In the Orthodox community, there are no women in the clergy, whereas in the conservative and Reform movements, there are women rabbis. Considering who is a Jew in the Orthodox community, they consider it only the matrilineal descent, so that the mother decides who is a Jew. In the conservative movement, they also see the matrilineal descent, but accept conversions. For the Reform movement, they see patrilineal descent. For the mitzvah, or the commandments, the Orthodox have 613. The conservative also have 613, but they once again acknowledge there may be some antiquated notions. In the Reform movement, there are mostly 10, with some others. For marriage, there is no intermarried couples in the Orthodox community. Conservative do accept intermarried couples, but they prefer conversion by one of the partners. In the Reform community, intermarriage is okay. There are many other differences between the movements in Judaism. Some of these include the length of the prayer service, whether or not to live as secular Jews, stances on abortion and capital punishment, homosexuality, the official process of conversion, gets or religious divorce, the birthright Israel movement, Shabbat or how to observe the Sabbath, the coming of the Messiah, how to follow the dietary laws of kashrut, what books are considered part of Jewish liturgy, and the length of the Jewish holidays. But one of the biggest and most divisive issues between all the movements is the reformists' insistence on straying away from the Hebrew language. Hebrew is considered a sacred language by Jews, and for millennia has been the only constant that connected the Jewish people no matter what continent or culture they lived in. Hebrew is ingrained in every aspect of prayer and worship in Judaism. It is the language of the oral culture that has been handed down from generation to generation. Praying and worshiping in Hebrew transcends any local language and transforms any synagogue into a sacred space. For this reason, Orthodox and conservative movements reject and nullify most of the reformists' beliefs. Although it's been almost 2 centuries since the split, the relations between the Reform and other Jewish communities remain strained. It seems the more the reformists evolve and strive to be even more secular, the more resolute and entrenched the other movements become. Reformists continue to fight to be part of the larger, pluralistic societies in which they live. This is true for American and European reformists especially, where their presence is most prevalent. The need to be accepted into the larger and more integrated world is understandable, and for this reason the reformist movement is gaining momentum. There is currently no one-size-fits-all version of Judaism. Jews must choose which movement better fits their belief system and live within that framework. Lastly, the only hope to better understand and fix the strained relations between the different movements is to encourage intrafaith and interdenominational dialogues, engaging individuals and communities on all levels.